This episode is brought to you in part by Museum of the Bible and its new worship experience, All Creation Sings, made in partnership with Creator. Step into an immersive room with vibrant visuals, soundscapes of praise, and interactive displays illuminating the story of worship. Get tickets at museumofthebible.org/ACS.
Welcome to the Grace Enough podcast. I am your host, Amber Cullum. This week, I sit down with Julie Sunne to discuss the comfort and hope found in the character of God. Julie's story includes multiple miscarriages, multiple healthy births, and learning to parent her disabled daughter in the midst of the unknowns. It's a beautiful journey in the midst of suffering that I hope helps you cling to God when you're uncertain and hurting. Good morning, Julie, and welcome to the Grace Enough podcast.
Thank you, Amber. It's a pleasure to be here.
I know people who listen to this show get so tired of hearing me say that I love to talk to guests who I know in person. And it feels like that is growing as we continue to attend conferences and things like that. You just get to know more people. And so it's really great to see you having pitched this book. And now it is something that is out in the world. And so I'm excited to talk to you about it.
Yeah, it's so fun to get to see you again. And, this is the benefit, the blessing of tools, right? Technology.
I love to start my episodes with just a little bit of how you came to know Christ. What does your early faith journey look like?
I was raised in the church. We went to church every Sunday. I was baptized as an infant, so baptized into the kingdom. I knew there was God and I loved him. I really did. And I wanted to kind of pursue him a little bit and know more about him. But that kind of waned quickly. And I had such a this is really strange to say, but I had such a good childhood that there wasn't many bumps in my childhood beyond sibling fights. And my youngest brother ran away once, but that lasted about 5 hours and I was devastated. But if that's all that happens, it was pretty good childhood, right? So I didn't have any major losses. I didn't have any major reason to lean on God. And so I kind of just went with the faith that I had. And I continued, to go to church. I continued to believe in God as a creator and sovereign God. But I didn't really walk with him in my daily life. I guess I would probably consider myself maybe like a Sunday Christian.
Yeah, like a cultural Christian, maybe?
Yeah, a cultural Christian. Yeah, I think that's probably right. So that's kind of how it was. And so that kind of set the background for when hard things started happening and I didn't know what to do with them. And I didn't know what to do with this God that I knew was there, but didn't know.
So that'll lead in a little bit to what we're going to dive into for you as a young married woman. Mm-hmm. And you're in this time, childbearing years. I want you to tell me, though, what did you kind of envision, which I would assume part of that, because you had a good childhood that was, seamlessly, nothing really crazy's happening.
Yeah.
You envisioned being a young mom a certain way and having a young family a certain way. And so tell me first, like what you thought it was going to be. And then we're going to obviously turn the train and talk about what it was really like.
Yeah. I just thought this was going to be great. I was going to marry my best friend, and we were going to have
ever after.
We were going to have, 13, 14 children. And I wanted a big family. Actually, it was probably more like 7. I was leaning toward, but, have 7 kids and they were, we would have a few little bumps, they might sass once in a while or they might, but for the most part, they're all going to be born healthy and we're going to have so much fun. And when they're adults, we're going to be our best friends, and so I really thought that God would bless my life because I was a good person. And I was a good person. I cared about people. And so on the outside, I thought I was doing the right things. So I expected God to bless my life, not with no bumps, but minor bumps, not not
Right.
caverns that pop up and that open up in front of me, but maybe just this, little dip that I have to go through. So I didn't know what to do when that didn't happen and caverns began to open in front of me instead of little dips, the big valleys that I had to cross. So that was a real shake up to my faith. I guess I would say that I kind of thought of God as I do my stuff, I put in my coins, and I get back that prize. And that's
He's a genie in a bottle for us a lot of times.
Genie in a bottle, and sadly, it's easy to conjure up that image of God, I think.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, I think that resonates with a lot of people. And then we have to really wrestle through what is it God letting us down? Or is it that we have attributed to him something that he has never attributed to himself?
Things that aren't true.
That's right.
Things that aren't true. Right. And Satan loves that. Oh my, that's probably one of his biggest things. We are a people that are very self-control. We love that control. We love that. And that's part of being made in God's image. Don't get me wrong.
Yes.
But it was totally messed up in the garden when sin entered. So that image of Christ in us is marred. So we have this faulty idea of what that should look like and what God's work in our lives should look like.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
that causes all kinds of problems. And in a nutshell, this is way too simplistic, but in a real meaningful way, that's one of the ways God uses suffering and one of the reasons he allows so much suffering.
We'll dig into that a little bit more as we talk about what ended up happening was, you begin to want to start having kids, and it's miscarriage after miscarriage after miscarriage. And so walk through that season of loss and confusion, because I'm not 100% sure, but I think this is the time when your faith did start to shift.
Yeah.
So walk through that and share a little bit of your journey with us.
Well, I was married to my best friend. So that helps. The first part that worked. That helps. But we too, But so we didn't have a lot of money. And so we waited a while before we decided to start to have children. And again, it was a very idealistic, naive way of thinking that I want this many children. I want the children now, and that's what's going to happen. And that's kind of my control coming out, I think, in it as well. Kind of sum it up, within an 8-year time span, I had 5 miscarriages and did give birth to 4 children. So it was a whirlwind of 8-9 years. It was just a crazy time when I look back at that. And it was the first miscarriage. So my first pregnancy ended in miscarriage, which shattered me and devastated me to the point where I was struggling with just getting up and going about my day. I found myself very lethargic. The color in my world had drained out. It was a very gray existence, as I guess one of the best ways I can describe it. And we have both my husband and I have very loving families, very caring families, and we're so grateful for that. But none of them had experienced miscarriage. None of them knew what that was or what to do or how to help. And so it's better, I think, when we don't know what to do, it's better to not. We tend to just ignore it and not say a whole lot, because maybe even acknowledge it so much. And I am a person who I can be pretty vulnerable, and I don't mind sharing. In fact, that's one of the ways I process and I get through things is by talking about it. So when I feel like I can't share, that hurts my healing.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. Yeah. And my husband and I, we loved each other, but we weren't really on the same page in certain ways. And we weren't the best communicators. We were somewhat young and hadn't learned that communication piece very well yet. So I felt very alone in that season, especially during that first miscarriage. I was very angry and I was very bitter. And that's kind of how it all started. And you're right when you said this is kind of where my faith journey really took a turn for the better, even though it didn't feel like for the better at that time. But I started wrestling with, do I want God? It sounds so horrible to say now, looking back, but is God worth following? Do I want do I trust him? Is he trustworthy? In probably the deepest, darkest times, it was no. I didn't feel that. I didn't really want to be with him. I didn't want him. It was kind of like that friend that hurt you so badly. Do you really want to be in their presence? But God was so, so gracious to me. I think of the sovereign, amazing God, all powerful, creator of the universe, breathed life into us. And yet here he is, putting up with me and my tantrum.
And honestly,
it floors me right now.
Honestly, deeply loving you in that, and actually being very much okay that you're just being honest with him.
Yeah, it's amazing to think that is the merciful, gracious, kind, patient, long-suffering God that we serve. Now it seems so silly, although I still go through many tantrums, but not quite like that. Yeah. So the Lord met me in a really unique and interesting way, and a very personal way, and probably the way that really grabbed my attention. And I was sleeping and just laying in bed. I woke up laying in bed, not wanting to get up. And the Lord sent to me an image, and I don't receive a lot of direct downloads from the Lord, but that I'm aware of anyway. But he sent me a dream, and in this dream he was holding, and I assume it was him. It was big hands, so I'm assuming it was him holding up my little girl, and he just imparted into my spirit, here she is. This is Sarah. She's beautiful, and she's with me, and she's fine. Now you need to just get up and live. And I didn't just jump out of bed and say, okay, Lord, I'm with you now. This is all good.
Right,
and but it was such a profound, beautiful experience in the depths of such darkness that I couldn't help but wonder. Then it made me really wonder, then who is he? Obviously I don't know who he is, because if I would have been him, I would have left me, because he doesn't. And so it really piqued my curiosity and started helping me question about who he really is, and rethinking my idea of who he is. And that was a beautiful journey. It wasn't a quick thing. In fact, it was a very long roller coaster journey for me. And it was a lot of ups and downs, because with every live birth, I'd be like, yay, God, you're so wonderful. You're amazing. And then I would experience miscarriage, and I would I didn't ever go as deep as I did after the first miscarriage, as deep into depression, but I did retain a lot of anger toward God during those times, because I hadn't opened myself up fully to the possibility of who God really is, and what that means for my expectations of him.
This episode is brought to you in part by Beyond Ordinary Women Ministries, which prepares Christian women for leadership. At BOW, we believe that every woman is a leader because she influences someone. So, whom do you influence? Do you mentor a woman? Serve in the workplace? Or do you lead a small group, teach the Bible, or even lead an entire ministry? No matter who or how many you influence, our free online resources will help equip you. Our videos, podcast episodes, and articles from experienced women leaders will encourage you and perfect your leadership skills. They offer wisdom for dealing with ministry pitfalls, current biblical issues, health for your own soul, and insights for shepherding others well. In addition, BOW offers Bible studies designed to connect women of multiple generations. They provide a challenge to both women new to the Bible and those wanting to dig deeper. Be our guest and browse all of our free resources and low-cost Bible studies at beyondordinarywomen.org.
So when you say that you hadn't really opened your mind to who God really is, what do you mean by that? Because I think I understand, but I know there's a lot of people listening who are hurting.
Yeah.
And a lot of people like myself, in the sense of yesterday, some things happened in my sister's community that it's just kind of left them devastated. And, I did look at my husband and say, why didn't God just answer that prayer? It's so easy. And I wasn't really looking for an answer.
Sure.
But I did look at my husband later and say, you know what I am so grateful for? That I have a relationship with God that I feel so deeply secure in that I can actually
Yeah.
take the walk outside and say, you know what, God, I'm mad that you didn't say yes to this.
Hmm.
I know you're who you say you are. And so help me as I'm wrestling through and wanting to know the why, but not really needing to know the why.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is who God is. That I mean, I'm grateful for a lot of things, but the fact that he doesn't turn us away. He is
Yeah.
not a God that is like slamming the door shut on you when you struggle with
Yeah.
doubt. And so but what do you mean when you say I hadn't really given into the idea of who he is and my own expectations of him?
Yeah. Well, that's it. It's much easier. That's exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's much easier for me for us, I think in general, as a people, to hold on to a God that we can understand.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so I wanted a God I could understand. And thank God I don't have a God I can understand, because he wouldn't be much of a God if my little pea brain can understand him.
Mm.
But I didn't, we're a people of such pride and, and as I said before, self-control. We want what we want, and we want to understand everything. And especially I did. And so I needed to be open to the possibility that the Lord was different than what I thought,
Yeah.
and that was better. That was something that was so important to me, to know that who he is and what he's allowing in my life is better in the end than what I might think I want now. And the only reason we can know that is if we grow to know the Lord enough to know that his character is unshakable and unchanging and solid. And we never need to think that it's going to change, that he's going to change. So your question about what I needed to open myself up to was that God knew a lot more than I did, and that he loves me a lot more than I realized, and that he's not going to leave me, and that he's got a plan within what looks like disaster.
Mm. Mm.
And I had to open myself to that whole possibility of God being someone that I could not ever fully understand. And also, Amber, that the why wasn't going to make it better.
I know.
And that was a hard one. I wanted a 5-step program to get through my pain. And really, the thing in my life that really set me up for beginning to surrender my expectations of him was when he brought my daughter into my life.
Yeah.
And we're going to get to that story, but that was huge. We did have disability early on. My oldest son, my firstborn, after that devastating miscarriage, was born with an arm that was disabled. And he still, it's much shorter than his other arm, and he has some function, but much less function than he would have. And we had gone through a lot of stuff with him early on. So that, looking back, God had used all of this stuff to wrestle with me, kind of like he did with Jacob, maybe.
Well, and I find it astounding. I mean, I can see God's sustaining grace in your life that you even opened yourself up to continue having children.
Mm-hmm.
Because so often, and I'm not saying that people who choose after having a child that has some type of disability is not opening themselves up to it. I just know people personally that is a great and valid fear
Oh,
of
absolutely.
can I go through this loss again?
Yeah.
If that's what happens.
Yeah.
And so as we move in to talk about your daughter, so you had your first miscarriage, then
Yep.
you had your son.
I had two boys.
Two boys back to
Yep.
back, or did you have miscarriages
Back to
in
back.
between?
Yeah, they were
them?
only
Okay.
15. They're only 15 and a half months apart.
Okay. And then did you have miscarriages in between your second son and your daughter?
Yeah, I had 2 miscarriages then,
Okay.
between my second son and our daughter. And then I had 2 more after my daughter, before our final son was born.
Wow.
And then my husband said, that's enough.
Yeah. He said enough loss and alive children. Enough.
Yeah. I wanted a big family, as I
Wow.
said before. And
Yeah.
and at that point, I think I was in a much better place
Yeah.
by the
Yeah.
time, but still, still growing. I'm still
That's what
growing.
happens too after you have toddlers. You either get a whole lot better or you get a whole lot worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry. I was thinking the other day, we were sitting around the dinner table. This is a total side note. And because people like teenagers can be tough, but man, they
I
are
was just going to
so
say,
much
maybe it's
fun too.
teenagers.
I don't know though, man. Like as hard as they also like make you
Yeah.
laugh.
Yeah.
And sometimes the like absent-mindedness is so absent-minded that it's only because there's hormone baths going on, because otherwise those things just don't happen.
Exactly.
I mean, and so in some ways it's kind of comical too. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I find teenagers to be enjoyable. And we were sitting around the table and my oldest son just came back with a great joke on my husband. And I'm like,
Yeah.
look at you, man, getting a sense of humor in your old age, and then we all cackled over that. And I'm like, yeah, teenagers can be pretty enjoyable, I think.
Yeah.
I mean,
They can.
toddlers can too, but they're just tiring.
Yeah, they are, but they're so sweet when they're
Sweet.
sleeping.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I did enjoy toddler life. I think I was just so tired, and
Yeah.
I was not mentally well then either.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure that I maximally enjoyed my toddlers just because of trying to figure out my own mental health at the time.
Sure.
So that's a side
Sure.
note.
Yeah. Well, we
But
got
so
lots
tell
of
me,
side notes we could
I
go
know
on.
well, when you have that many kids, that's what happens.
Yep. Yep.
So when you had your daughter,
Yes.
and she was born with disabilities, and you guys figured that out, I think, pretty early. And so talk to us about that season and the emotions that came with that after all of these years of working
Hmm.
through a different type of emotion, but you have two healthy children at this point. Yeah, so what was that experience like?
Yeah, it was busy. The boys were very close in age, 16 months apart, basically, and so we were still, of course, dealing with some things with Daniel and his arm,
Mhm.
and then Rach was born, and we, because of my miscarriages, we did do some interventions. We had like a progesterone cream that I used and things like that, but I really didn't have much of an idea that anything was wrong when Rachel was born. And actually, it took us several hours to even know that there was any problems. Our doctor had done the baby exam just a few hours or 2 hours, whatever, after she was born, and came back and said, well, we do have one issue, and that's that she has a cleft palate.
Okay.
And the palate is the roof of your mouth. And a lot of people have heard of cleft
Mhm.
lip. Well, if cleft lip, you can see it on the outside. With her,
Right.
it was a simple little hole, and it was only in the soft palate. So it was way in the back. So it didn't affect any of her facial features. And so he came back and told us that. And he said, well, it's going to affect her nursing and her feeding, but I don't have a lot of experience with this, but we'll get some help. We'll reach out to lactation specialists. And, that she should be able to have that repaired at 11 months, somewhere in there.
Right.
And that should take care of it. And so I remember distinctly calling my mom at that point and just saying, I was so excited. We had our little girl, and she was beautiful. And that's exactly what I said. I said, Mom, we have our little girl and she's perfect except for a little hole in the roof of her mouth. And that can be fixed at 11 months. So, we're just so excited. And I had named her after Mom. So her name was Rachel Lois. My mom's name was Lois. And so it was just a wonderful experience at
Mhm.
that point. And we were just so thrilled. And it wasn't until it was sort of quick, I guess, but also not very quick, to find out about her other disabilities. So we pursued lactation specialists to get her
Yep.
nursing. And I knew she was going to have surgery. So I'm a very, let's do the best we need to do, no matter what it costs, what it takes to provide the best for her. So she couldn't really nurse, but I was insistent we nurse. So I was nursing, and then I would pump. So I'd nurse for however long, and then I would pump for another 40 minutes, and then I would give it to
Yes.
her in a special bottle. So it was like nonstop.
Yep. And you got two
Um,
babies running around.
and I got two little boys running around. So it was kind of crazy, but it got worse, because at 6 weeks old, she was thriving. And then at 6 weeks old, she quit breathing on us in the middle of the night.
Oh my
I
gosh.
heard her on the
Praise
baby
God.
monitor, got up, and something didn't sound right. And I just thought, oh, she's just hungry, and got in there. And it was a scary sight. And I knew something was wrong. She was struggling. She would grasp a breath, and then she would kind of lose that breath, and she would choke up again and just not be able to breathe. And my husband was a peace officer and was trained in CPR and first responding stuff. So I grabbed her and ran into him and put her in his arms, and he said, do something, fix this. And he was trying to wake up and try to understand the situation. But anyway, so we ended up with a hospital drive, an ambulance drive to the hospital, where we were thinking it was a heart issue, just very, off the top, just thinking it's got to be heart. And it ended up, she did have some heart anomalies, we found out, but it wasn't that. It was a gastroesophageal reflux issue, which was, again,
Yeah.
A midline thing. So her cleft was midline, her reflux issue was midline, her heart, she had a couple holes in her heart that normally close at birth that did not.
Yep.
And she had some stenosis that was midline. So we were starting to see a pattern. And then as she got to be about 4 or 5 months old, I already had 2 boys, so I knew what milestones should look like, and she wasn't meeting them. So then we started going through the path of some interventions, and we got the diagnosis of developmental delay, which is what they kind of throw at you if your child just isn't progressing. So we started some early intervention, and she did not walk or talk until she was about 4 years old. And it was about that time that we chose to go to a private, it was an autism treatment program, but we knew she wasn't autistic. She didn't have a lot of the characteristics of autism, but yet she needed some more interaction. She wasn't as interactive as we wanted her to be, as engaging with us as we thought that she could. And we thought this would be a good program. And interestingly, the program focused on the parents first. And so we went to the program in Massachusetts, or I think it was in Pennsylvania, but we flew into Massachusetts. We went there just ourselves, which was probably the first time we had gotten away since she was born. Right. And it was probably the best, not for us personally and our relationship, because we were struggling because of all the stress in our lives, and we weren't communicating the best. And by the way, communication is so important in marriage.
So is.
just throw that in there.
Keep working on it though. That's something else too. It's like, don't give up so easily. Like do the things, because I agree.
But at this program, there was something so profound that I needed. And it was there. I think you had sent me the questions you sent me early on. One of them was, where did really God start getting a hold of me? And I think it began at the dream after my first miscarriage. But this time when Rach was 4 years old and we went to this program was such a pivotal time. It makes me tear up just thinking about it. I was so broken at that point. And I didn't feel I always tend to put on a strong front. So I don't open up always to those people closest to me. But this person was a total stranger, and they provided counseling at this program. And I lost it with the counselor. I poured everything, all the hurt from everything to her. And I remember just losing it. It was so uncharacteristic of me. But it's exactly what I needed to do. Was I needed to acknowledge all that hurt and brokenness in me. And what the program did was help me to see that Rachel was not made in a way that needed to be fixed, so to speak. Rachel was a beautiful gift in who she was. And that you still pursue things that help her develop to the best of her ability. We all do that in all of our children. So that was important. But it was also important that I learned to embrace my daughter, all of my daughter, for who she is.
Oh, wow.
Because God had given us this beautiful gift. And it's so tempting when you have a child with disabilities to kind of compartmentalize, sort of like we do with our faith. We have this Sunday faith, and then we have this real world life during the week. It's kind of like that. It's like we have this disability part, but then we have this beautiful daughter over here. No, she's beautiful in and of herself. Her disabilities make her, the special needs that she has make her as beautiful as she is in so many different ways. Yeah. And that was such a turning point in my life to open myself up to the possibilities that God has that may look different than what I want them to look like.
Yeah, that is really, that is just a really profound thing to also, like not always have this mindset of this is normal and this is where everyone should be.
Yeah.
And how we can cling to that so hard that we miss the beauty that's right in front of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good word.
Unfulfilled expectations. Our expectations cause us to miss so much because our expectations are based on what we know, and we know so little.
Amen.
I mean, really, we really do. And so then when our expectations are so little, and God has these huge expectations, and so we can't grasp them. And so that sets us up for failure in our relationship, in our trust of God, honestly.
Ooh. And that kind of brings us to your devotional that's called Sometimes I Forget. I mean, that's basically what you're saying right now. Like we forget a lot of things about God, but we also forget that, or not also, one of the things we forget is his ideas are so much bigger
Yeah.
and broader. And honestly, at times things we can't even understand. Yet many of us, I don't know that many of us will ever get to the point where we say, oh, well, we can accept that suffering is a part of your bigger idea and we like it and want it,
Yeah. Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
um, and I'm not sure, yeah, I don't think that was obviously his first choice either. So that's important to know.
Yes. We know
But
sin entered.
that's right. And so there's two questions that you really press into in your devotional. You press into, how do we trust God for good when everything looks so wrong? And how do we hold on to hope when our world is falling apart? And so, as I mentioned to you earlier, I know two people who are just going through some
Yeah.
really hard things right now, like really hard things.
Yeah.
And so, when you think about your devotional and those people and those questions, what are some examples of how you help people to answer those questions?
Mhm. That's a really good question. What I wanted the book to do was to remind people that just what I was saying just before, that
Mm,
our expectations are so little compared to what God has in mind. And to realize that when we look at the whole character of God, his entire nature, we find the hope that we're looking for because all of his attributes, his whole character allows us to realize that he is who he says he is, much bigger than our circumstances, more loving than we could ever imagine, and far more capable than we can possibly comprehend.
mm,
And so as I went through this book, the reminders I needed were that it's not about what I like, it's about what God knows is best and what he allows as best. So let me explain it this way. I didn't like his God's sovereignty very much in my early years of motherhood. I struggled so much with a sovereign God who would allow suffering,
mhm,
and particularly my suffering.
mhm,
But now, after I've been through so much and I've seen his faithfulness and I've surrendered some of my expectations for what God tells me is true in his word, and I've learned to be true from walking with him, I can now, I can see his sovereignty as a beautiful thing. I love his sovereignty. His sovereignty is one of the things that comforts me the most
mm,
because I don't have to. I know he's still in control of the future for my daughter when I can't be here anymore.
mm.
And that's a real heartache for me.
Yeah.
And still, I struggle with that. And if
Mhm,
I forget God's sovereignty, along with all of his other attributes, I can't just cherry pick his sovereignty, because if I cherry pick his sovereignty and leave out his love
mm.
and his grace and his mercy, then his sovereignty can
Mean.
be pretty harsh.
That's right.
Yes.
Mhm,
And so that's why it's so important. The way I wrote the book as, yes, this is an attribute, and this is why I can have this trust through his sovereignty, because he is in control. But within that devotion, it doesn't just focus on his sovereignty, because you can't just isolate one of God's attributes out and say, this is the attribute that's going to give you hope, because you have to take it all. It's his nature is what gives us hope, because all of his nature is perfect. And so his love is perfect. His sovereignty is perfect. His omniscience is perfect. His patience is perfect. Thankfully, his patience is perfect, or he would have long left me behind.
mm.
And so the book is going to remind people of the truth of who God is. And when we can no longer remember that because we're blinded by the pain of our circumstances,
Mhm.
that's when we need to pick up something that reminds us, and go to the word first. Yes, please go to the word first. But when you need something a little bit more succinct, when you need to see someone else who's been there
Yeah. That's it right there.
and has realized that the sovereignty and the truth of who God is enough. Maybe not to make me like it,
Yeah.
but it is enough that we can hold on to him and we can let go of our expectations, at least
Yeah.
some of our expectations. And when we can do that, we find hope, and we find healing,
Mhm.
and we find that we can move forward. I love the quote that Johnny Erickson taught, and I throw this one out a lot, that God allows what he hates to achieve what he loves. And I think I messed that one up a little bit, but the sentiment is there. He's a father. He doesn't necessarily want to see his children suffer. And that's his loving kindness in there. That's his mercy, his care, his generosity, his graciousness. He doesn't want that for us. But in his omniscience and omnipotence and righteousness and holiness, he knows what needs to be in our lives to achieve that which he wants the most for us. And that's our salvation. And that's us to walk as more clear image bearer of him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
It does answer my question. I mean, I think that's a hard, it tells me exactly what you're providing, which is important. And it does answer the question of, I mean, how do we keep going?
Yeah.
When it's just hard. And I think that personally, what I think that you provide, and I've said this at the beginning even, is the experience is so vital when sometimes you're right in the middle of something and a lot of things feel like empty words.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things that you knew before, you begin wondering, was that foundation as firm as I thought it was?
Yeah.
And that is a normal, honestly, I think healthy process to walk through.
Oh, absolutely.
But sometimes I forget is there to say, keep taking the next step.
Yeah.
The foundation is sure. It will be there. And you're able to ask the questions. And so
to ask the questions and to be open to God and what he's doing in your life. I think it's so easy when we go through the hard struggles, and I did this, is to shut down and just try to make it and not being open to what God might be doing in that. Open to the possibilities. That's what was so profound about that experience when I went to the training program for Rachel, was it opened me up to the possibilities that God had, which was for Rachel, yes, but also for me and for what the possibility of what she might be in my life. Yes, she's extra work. Of course she is. And there's maybe extra worry. I don't know. Parents worry all the time. Mothers worry all the time, but not worry, are concerned, right? Because worry, we don't want to do.
Well, yeah,
worry
it all depends. I mean, the reality is we still do slip
worry.
Into worry.
we tend to do that, but we know it's not going to get us anywhere.
That's right.
But yeah, but to be open to the possibilities that God has something much greater than we can even imagine, and not to maybe give it that all yet, maybe not to surrender all that hold that we have on what we understand, but to be open to the possibility. That's where I think the healing starts, is to be open to the possibility that God is much greater than we know. And he is a sustainer and he is a redeemer. And
praise God.
So what we see as a dead end or as an impossibility is what he uses to bring possibility into our lives and to bring beauty for us, but other people as well. Yeah. And, he's a victor. We know how this ends. If we are a Christian, if we're a follower of Christ, we know what the ending looks like for us, but we want it here on earth. We aren't going to get it here on earth.
Yeah. Whew. Sorry. I'm just thinking about that. I think when it comes to here on earth too, I always say to the students I work with, and even in our home, we pray for this, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And I try to say there are pockets of heaven on earth. And what I mean by that is it may only be a glimpse, but it's that glimpse. If you just tune into it, you can see the Lord's kingdom right here. And sometimes those are the things we have to cling to too, because we want to see it and experience it so bad that it can be hard to keep that future hope. But that's what's so beautiful about seeing these moments on earth and saying, okay, God, that's your kingdom come, your will be done here. As it
and
is.
when we can't see it in our life yet, that's where it's important to see it in other people's lives.
Absolutely.
And that's where I'm not a huge confession here. I'm not a huge devotional reader, which is really interesting since I write devotions, but because I want the word.
Right.
But that's where devotions and devotionals are so important.
Yeah.
And other people's stories are so important is because when we don't see that glimpse in our own life of God's grace here on earth and the glimpse of heaven to come, we can see it in other people's lives who have gone through and maybe processed a little bit further than we have.
That's right.
And what he's done in my life. So if you need to hold on to something, that's what you can hold on to until you can see your own.
That's right.
Glimpses of heaven on earth. I think about this, we so often, how do we end prayers? We end prayers with amen.
I agree.
Which means so be it.
Yeah.
And then we say, but no, not really. And we grab that back, right?
Oh, yes.
Like you said, thy will be done. Amen. No, not really. I didn't really mean that.
I really want my will.
Exactly.
Not yours.
Exactly.
Whatever you want is whatever I want.
Yeah. So we have to just, it's such to learn to more closely walk in our amens. I think is the journey of sanctification. It's the journey of this walk to be more Christ-like.
Amen. So be it. Well, Julie, thank you so much. If someone wants to connect with you, find more resources, where can they find you?
Well, the best place is juliesunne.com, my website, JULIESUNNE.com. And I also have some freebies and some giveaways there. Otherwise, I'm on most of the socials. I've not gotten into TikTok. I'm not brave enough for that one. But I do Instagram, JulieSunne1, Facebook, Twitter. I'm either Julie Sunne or Julie Sunne1. It depends on the platform. LinkedIn.
Awesome.
So I would love to walk with people to just journey together. We need each other.
We sure do.
And that was another thing I really want to emphasize on my journey. It was important that I became open enough to God to seek out a church that was truthful about who he is, and allowed me to, and it helped me heal and to be able to learn more about who God was. And so find your church community.
Absolutely.
A Bible believing church community. It's so important for our walk as well, because we need those people, and we need to hear the truth, because faith comes by hearing, and we need to hear the truth.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Julie. I appreciate you. Thank you for listening to today's conversation. You can purchase Julie's book, Sometimes I Forget, anywhere books are sold. But when you purchase through the link in my show notes, I receive a small payout at no cost to you. That's true for all of the resource links on graceenoughpodcast.com. So I'm grateful for every purchase you make as an Amazon affiliate using the links found on graceenoughpodcast.com.
Thank you for listening to the Grace Enough Podcast. Tune in next time.